This is gonna be the best day of my life. My life. Ha, 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 ha.
Keep going.
And hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Welcome to Get a Grip with Coach Elex. I'm your host, Coach Elex. With me, the amazing, the wonderful
Stephen Frederick Masick /
Also,
attorney / medium is here with you today.
that today and every day, Stephen
Yes.
happens to be my husband,
Yes.
and he's also a medium. He's also known as Stephen the Medium, and my co-host for the show, and I am his co-host for his show. And together we are known as Stelex. So here we are, and Stephen, I'm looking out the window, and honestly, this scenery is absolutely gorgeous. We're coming to you live from our home studio, home studio in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and we got snow today, and it is absolutely gorgeous, right?
Well, listen, you're asking me. I could have this every day for 365 days a year.
Absolutely,
Just saying.
and you could, and if it was up to Stephen, we would have a couple of feet of snow, and he would be happy as happy can be. Because I'm convinced in a previous life you were like an Eskimo or something like that,
No, polar bear.
a polar bear.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
good.
So
Yeah, I'll take
'cause
either. I'll take
You're
either.
you're very comfortable with the cold. So Stephen, let's talk a
love
little
it.
bit about what you're up to.
Well, that's a big question for me because there's a lot. I just got off the phone with Lindsay, who does all our backstage incredible, amazing stuff because she's just phenomenal. And
Yep.
I love that we set the Zoom up today, and she in a text or email prior said, she's interested in my goals. And I've never really been a person of goals. I just go like day by day. But I love the fact that she asked me and that it forced me to put down goals and to envision 2022. So there is a lot on the burner coming
Yeah.
forward. So
And she is trained by me, so she's doing exactly the right thing because, goals without a plan that are not written down, they're not goals, they're illusions. So I'm glad that somebody's holding you to account.
she said you're not really her cup of tea. That's what she said to me. So
Yeah, okay. So I doubt very much that that's what she said, but
I doubt that too.
exactly. But Mark and I were talking before the show started, and he says he was very explicit in saying that one of your goals should be to stay away from the kitchen.
I don't understand. I'm not really sure mentally where Mark is because maybe he's just he's fallen off his rocker because I am just a peach everywhere. So
Yep.
just
So
like
what?
you'd find in the kitchen, a peach, right?
Yeah, so what Mark is referring to this past week, I happened to be out meeting with a client. I think it was Monday.
That was your first
and
mistake.
That
Leaving
was
me
my
alone.
first mistake. And I come home and Steven is in the kitchen. The video is set up, the lights set up, and he's been doing some video of him cooking, baking some cookies, healthy cookies. And I just looked like, oh my God, what is this? But thankfully, it was not alive. So he gave me an opportunity to just compose myself and just figure out what he was doing. He already had a batch of, he did peanut butter cookies, very healthy peanut butter cookies. Actually, a really good recipe. And he already had a batch in the oven. He's like, I did the cookies, but I think there's something wrong. So, Stephen, oh my God, he's perfect for worst cook. That the worst cooks in America show.
No, I would win. I would win.
You would probably win. So I opened the oven and there's like balls baking, and he forgets or doesn't know that because he's baking cookies that are really two ingredients and there's nothing. If you bake a ball, that's what you're gonna bake, a ball. So there were balls, and they're also they require very little time baking. So it was a hot mess. But the good news is that he still had some dough left. So I was able to give you a few hints, but I didn't really do anything for you.
No, you did nothing. It was all me.
Yes.
I reassessed, got some tips from you, and added a little sugar, used a little fork, which you told me to, and they really came out really good.
Yes, and the dogs loved them. So in essence, you made like the most delicious dog biscuits. I actually ate them, and I can see because they're very peanut buttery, and the dogs love peanut butter, and we love peanut butter. So I thought they were actually good, very good. You did good.
Yeah, I did, and that was first time using a food processor. That took me 20 minutes to find, and also first time doing something really from scratch. Like there was nothing. Nothing that came out of a box. It was all me. It was just all me.
Yeah, and Steven asked me, what's a food processor? Where's the food processor? And I explained to him, and he just gives me that stare look. Like, what? Like, I don't know what you're talking about. But eventually you managed, you found it, you figure it out. And because I wasn't home. I literally came home to Steven in the kitchen. So,
well, you gotta agree or admit that the dough that I made was perfect.
It was?
It was. It wasn't falling apart. It was actually perfect cookie dough.
Yeah, I mean, I don't criticize that at all because, you managed to do a really good cookie. And it's a very healthy cookie. 2 ingredients, right? Dates and peanut butter. That's it.
That's
gentlemen?
Yes, sir?
Hi.
Yes, Mark.
I heard my name being bantered around, so...
I just told Steven what you said, the truth, that he shouldn't be in the kitchen. And he's very offended by it.
Can I just ask one question?
I'm afraid.
No, it's not. Does he now know about the difference between a convection oven?
Well, it wasn't about. It was about a pure and a baking. That's what it said. The pure convection and baking convection. Look, what is? That's what I was asking. I knew what a convection oven is. I just didn't know the difference. Why is one labeled baked and one is labeled pure? What is that?
Well, because one you use for baking and the other one you would use for something else other than baking.
Well, I asked you that and you said, I don't know.
Well, because when you asked me, I wasn't in front of the stove, so I wasn't sure what you exactly were referring to.
Mm-hmm.
But later on, I didn't go to see this. But later on, I went to see exactly what you were talking about, and okay, he's looking at the different settings. So, but the point is, Stephen, and the most important point is that you really, going forward, our agreement is that I'm in charge of the kitchen. Just saying, right?
Scusi? No entiendo. I don't understand. Scusi?
So anyway, a lot of good things happening. One of the other good things that is happening is that Steven, myself, and my mom are getting ready for a trip to Puerto Rico. And to go to Puerto Rico, you have to get COVID testing, and we got our results today, and we were all negative, which is really exciting because if you do get a positive test, you cannot go to Puerto Rico. So, and lately with Omicron, it's like no matter how good you take care of yourself, sometimes you just don't know. You could test positive. So, I was very, I was nervous, but I felt confident that we were going to be negative, and we are. So we are heading to Puerto Rico next week, and it's really exciting. I can't wait. How about you?
Well, actually Sunday.
That's right. That's right. Well, yeah, that's what I meant. Like we are leaving Sunday. We're going to be there the entire week, and so there will be no show next week. Either Stephen the Medium or Coach Elex will both be away. And actually, I believe Mark is also taking the week off.
Yeah, so he got a vacation. I just said to Lindsay when I was talking to her, it's so difficult to be married to someone from Puerto Rico. I got to go back there again. Leave this to go to this gorgeous weather right now. Oh, well, I'll do it.
Yes. So Stephen, today's show we're going to talk about emotional burnout, how to spot emotional burnout, and how to take effective action to deal with emotional burnout. And what led me to this subject is, I do a lot of work in healthcare. A lot of my clients are healthcare based, whether they're executives, they're direct line workers, doctors, nurses, other clinical staff, respite staff. And one of the things, they're very, very common themes very often is burnout. But often people focus on the physical burnout, right? And what I notice is that physical, and I think you brought an important, something to consider, because the way I was looking at it, for me, as I'm doing some of these trainings about it, with my clients, I noticed that there's a lot of physical burnout. They're talking about the physical burnout, that the hours that they're working, they're exhausted, there's not enough time, they're not spending time with their families, on and on and on. But then what I realized, or that aha moment that I had, was that emotional turnout leads to, that physical burnout leads to emotional burnout, which I think the emotional burnout can be pretty significant and often has a deeper impact on us. You, on the other hand, when we were talking about this, when I was, sharing the idea of having a show on emotional burnout, you said what, Stephen?
You put me on the spot. I said a lot of things. I don't.
No, but yeah, of course you don't. Do you not remember the conversation we had? See,
well, I remember the conversation, but there were several things that were.
No, but one thing that you said that they did give me pause, Stephen, because you said to me, "Well, what if emotional burnout leads to physical burnout?"
Oh,
that it could be the other way around as well. And to be honest with you, Stephen, I didn't even realize. I was never even paying attention. I didn't look at it from that perspective. But I think you're absolutely right.
I'm just amazing.
Yeah. So, and again, I sort of related to being a caregiver, and I know that in the past I've talked, we even had a show about caregivers, and I spoke about my own personal experience with my family. But when you brought up emotional burnout can lead to physical burnout that way, then I started realizing that, that maybe that's some of what I'm experiencing myself as a caregiver.
Wow.
Because a lot of what I'm feeling is that emotional burnout. And we when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about what emotional burnout is, and how to spot it, and then obviously how to take decisive action that will help us deal with it. So, anything you want to add?
No, I love the subject because just the amount of people that this hits, it's certainly, this discussion is not discriminatory against people, so it's a great conversation. And again, like many of the subjects you come up with, Elix, it just even just the fact that it makes people feel like they're not alone, that they're not going through this because there's something wrong with them, or they're crazy, or they can't handle things, I think is incredible.
Yeah. So let's do this. Let's take a break. And when we come back, we are going to talk about emotional burnout. We'll be right back. And hello, everyone, and welcome back to Get a Grip with Coach Elex. I am your host, Coach Elex, and with me, my wonderful
Co-host Stephen the Medium.
Stephen the Medium. Together, we are Steelex. And today we are talking about the subject of emotional burnout, how to spot emotional burnout and how to take action to deal with emotional burnout. One of the things that I think has sort of highlighted or brought to the surface the emotional burnout for many people, whether it's healthcare workers, actually people in retail, and simply all of us, is dealing with the COVID pandemic. There's actually a great article in The Atlantic that references, how the mental health crisis of the pandemic is real, and how, sort of has led to these burnout, both physical and emotional burnout. Now, there's different kinds of or types of burnouts. All kinds of burnouts center on the unpleasant emotions that we feel of a particular situation, and that's based on. That's how psychology today would define burnout. Emotional burnout is a state in which one feels worn out mentally and physically, often because it's accumulated stress from a situation in their personal lives. And I added physically because I am so reminded of what you said, Stephen, that indeed, it's not, it can go either way. Emotional burnout can lead to physical burnout, and physical burnout can also lead to emotional burnout. The past few years have been a recipe for emotional exhaustion. There has been drastic changes in how we work, or for many, the lack of work. At the beginning of COVID, many people were faced with unemployment. We're faced with uncertainty. We are also dealing with headlines that are pretty scary. At the beginning, how we were dealing with how many COVID deaths, right? We're also dealing with a very I don't know what the right term is, but a political unrest in the political environment, if you will. And we often, these past few years, we're spending more time on our smartphones. And often our smartphones are taking over for time that we spend with the family, time that we spend with friends, and so on, and so on, and so on. So I think all of that leads to, or can play a very important role in emotional burnout, what we feel is emotional burnout. Stephen, have you dealt with emotional burnout at all?
Yeah, I mean, I love what you've been saying, Elix. And, one of the reasons why I said, this is not discriminatory is that I think a lot of people automatically go right to, physical emotional burnout is connected to job. It's just job. It's just the job. Because that's like, maybe it's the majority. And because, you go to work every day and you work too much and there's the stress and that's what happens. But the fact is, it's not just about work. It's about every aspect of life, wherever the stress lands, and it doesn't have to be created by the work environment. It can be any other place. But yeah, I mean, I the more I thought about what I said earlier, that the majority of people, or a lot of people, have been through this, I think, I wouldn't be surprised if like almost everybody has. And yeah, absolutely, Elix, in all aspects, whether it's a job or losing a job, or I remember when I decided to go back to college full time. I had taken, I think, 4 years off. Right out of high school, I went into college and just barely got through a year. I hated it, and then went into the workforce, and then realized, I'm never going to get into a great job. I'm going to be working these jobs that I don't want without a college education. And when I went, I was working 3 jobs part-time, going through college full-time. And that, I think I had both physical and emotional just burnout, just because everything that was happening.
Yeah. And for me, one of the best ways that I relate to the emotional burnout. And again, this has been like an aha moment for me. As many of you know, I'm a caretaker for my mom. She's 96 years old. My mom, by the way, is still a very active 96-year-old. She lives independently, with us. She recently had a stroke in October, but has done a full recovery. But I am her caretaker. I have to make sure that she's okay. I check on her all the time. I do her, pay her bills. I do her finances, whatever that entails. And I thought that what I experienced often with being a caretaker was the physical burnout. Like I feel exhausted, right? I have to finish my job. I'm with clients all the time to make sure that she's okay, or I have to take breaks in between my day to make sure that she's okay. I have to, when I'm done, oftentimes I have to go downstairs to to check up on her and do whatever she needs to do, whether it's laundry or whatever, take her out for appointments or whatever. But what I realized, Stephen, is that recently my aha moment is that the burnout that I'm experiencing is more emotional. Like I told you, and I shared this with you before, like I often, I feel on edge. Like if my phone rings and it's her, I feel on edge. Right. Like, oh my God, is she okay? If I leave the house, I tell Steven, like, I'm on edge all the time. Is she going to be okay? Should we leave? Should we go too far? When I walk in the morning just to say good morning, I'm on edge. Is she going to be there? Is she going to be okay? Is she going to be alive? And that's all part of that emotional burnout. And again, burnout happens when we've exceeded our capacity for emotional stress, when we feel overstimulated, we feel drained, and simply emotionally exhausted. And that's exactly how I feel. And if you're listening, I want you to sort of, do a self-inventory for yourself. Like, are you feeling drained? Are you feeling overstimulated? Are you feeling emotionally exhausted? Because if you answer yes, you're then likely dealing with the emotional burnout. Anyone, as Stephen said, can experience emotional burnout. It also, as Stephen said, it does not have to be related to work specific. And in my case, has nothing to do with work. It's more to do with caring for my elderly mom. Especially common in people dealing with relationship stress, with grief, working, an emotionally taxing job. That's what a lot of our healthcare takers are dealing with. Nurses, ICU nurses right now are overwhelmed with emotional stress. Or people who are going through major life changes, whatever they are. Retailers are going through a lot of emotional burnout because often they deal with unruly customers who are upset. If there's a mask mandate, people yelling, screaming, fighting, and all of that adds to, building that emotional burnout. And it is also common during scary current events, when we've bombarded with so many negative headlines. Again, Stephen, going to Puerto Rico, I mean, there's like this COVID, breakout there, and all of a sudden you feel so stressed. Oh my God, are we going to be okay? Oh my God, because there's so much negativity that we are sort of facing day in, day out. What do you think, Stephen?
Well, one of the things that I think in the positive about whether it's physical or emotional burnout is that when you're in the midst of it, there's things that you can do immediately to help. And when you're dealing with things like this, there's not always that immediate thing that you can just get up and say get out and take a walk in the woods or exercise, because that certainly helps that burnout. And that's one great thing that that I love thinking about, because there's some things that, it's not in your control. Maybe you need to see a doctor. Maybe you need medication, whatever that may be. In this particular case, at least trying to look at the positive piece, you can just get out and take a walk, and just that alone is such a reward to yourself and to help this. At least maybe, even if it moves the gauge a little bit, at least it's a start.
Yeah, Stephen, and again, if you're listening to us for the first time, Stephen also is not only an attorney, he's also a medium. So often, we sort of go into the spirit realm, right?
Right.
From a spirit perspective, what would you say are it's something that we should sort of be in the lookout for, or things that we could do if we feel that we are experiencing emotional burnout?
Well, I think I'll back into this one to answer this, because maybe that's my MO. Earlier, I backed into the emotional to the physical. I don't know, but what I do know, Elix, is that when I do readings daily, and I do a lot of readings, one thing that ties into this emotional and physical burnout is that I get. It's not a lot, but I have experienced loved ones in spirit talking about how, if they had one regret, it's that they wish they were happier, and but they say it in the sense that they know it was their responsibility, that they weren't happier because they were stressed out, out over this or that. And also, many times I've had spirit talk about the work piece, that they wish they didn't work as much, that they didn't spend as much time with their family because of working. And I think I'm backing into it, because I think it's a great perspective when, whether you're in it or you're thinking about it, that you've got these wise people that walked the same path on this earth that we are doing right now, but they have the benefit that they've already done it, and they can see the future, the past, the present, and they've got this amazing advice to give. And it's just a perspective of, what can I do to not have that regret? If that answers the question.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about signs that you may be in the lookout for, that may tell you that you are experiencing emotional burnout. And then we'll conclude with what you could do to deal to heal emotional burnout. We'll be right back. And hello and welcome back to Get a Grip with Coach Elix. I am your host, Coach Elix, with me, my wonderful co-host,
Stephen the Medium.
Stephen the Medium, and we are talking about emotional burnout. And by the way, one of my friends, colleagues, we're trying to get her, or she just called, and we're having a little bit of phone issue, but we should get her shortly. In the interim, I want to share with you, signs that you should be in the lookout for that might tell you are experiencing emotional burnout. So, number one, if you're feeling physical symptoms, for example, and this is the one that you want to really be self-aware, in the lookout for. If your body is in constant fight or flee mode, you are in that, fight, flee, protect, defend, which it can actually can affect physical symptoms. Your heart rate, you can feel your heart rate. Sometimes you're sweating. Sometimes you feel very high levels of anxiety. That may be a sign of emotional burnout. The body reacts to constant stress just like the mind does. So whether it's headaches, digestive issues, heart palpitations, obvious weight fluctuation, also different eating patterns, eating a lot more or a lot less, and sleeping patterns, being tired all the time, or you can't sleep at all. Those are all physical symptoms. Now, if you also notice, another symptom is notice if you're responding irrational, if you are having irrational emotions, you're overly tired, or you're very irritable, a sense of pessimism or hopelessness about the future, where you just feel sort of victimized by the circumstances, or overwhelmed by small tasks. I can tell you, Stephen, it's very, very good at pointing out to me when I feel irritable. And that in the past, I sort of dismissed it. Now I'm beginning to understand that it validates that I'm also dealing with that emotional burnout. Another sign is if you have very little motivation, you're feeling blah about everything from exercise to plans with friends, or you feel impossible to get out of bed in the morning. You lack interest in things that used to bring joy to you. That's a sign of emotional burnout. You may have picked up or increased a method of coping over indulging in food or alcohol, relying on a glass of wine to distress, a third cup of coffee to feel motivated. Be aware, be self-aware, start paying attention. That may be a sign that, again, that's you're utilizing those methods as a coping tool to deal with emotional burnout. And this one is something I relate to. There are many people who are empath to the extreme. Empaths are the most common personality to feel fatigue by emotions. I can tell you, I relate to that totally. I picked up somebody else's emotion very rapidly and very commonly. So not only are you dealing with your stress, but you're also taking on somebody else's stress. Empaths feel more personal responsibility and are less likely to take a break. So those are signs. If any of what I said, it's something that sounds familiar to you, that is definitely a sign that you need to pay attention and that you may be dealing with emotional burnout. And I believe we do have my friend, my colleague, somebody that I've been doing a number of training series with. And, it's interesting because we've done some training to direct healthcare providers, and we have heard them directly express how they are both physically and emotionally burnt out. So, Deborah, are you here?
I am, Alex. Can you hear me?
Yes, finally. Hello, Deborah.
Hi.
Thank you for calling in, Deborah. We're talking about emotional burnout, and I know over the last a few times that we have led trainings for recent staff, this has been a common theme. What has been your experience in dealing with emotional burnout, Deborah?
So it's fascinating that you say that. In the beginning, we taught a lot about burnout just being in relation to occupational burnout, related to some systemic stressors over time, difficulties with policies and procedures, and difficult work relationships. But emotional burnout really encompasses occupational burnout, and as Stephen was saying, those stressors in your life, the caregiving or the grieving, or dealing with children, or being an educator, a whole host of these additional stressors, and then having it compounded with COVID, your body can only sit with so much threat perception. And we are at this point in time spent. And I often hear people talking about that in terms of I'm spent, I'm drained, I'm depleted. And that's really what we're talking about. When there's no more left to give, there's this emotional exhaustion, the feelings of dread about not wanting to deal with not just one aspect of your life, but all aspects of your life. And one of the keys that I see when people are, really in the midst of emotional burnout, which, by the way, happens gradually over time, which is why people often don't notice it until they're way, way down that rabbit hole. Because it isn't something that comes on suddenly like you would experience symptoms of a trauma. It's something that happens gradually. And so people don't recognize it. And to your point, you're absolutely right. The body and the mind are inextricably linked. And it can be the physical symptoms show up first, or the emotional symptoms, or what I would also add is the cognitive symptoms. And this is what I'm seeing a lot more of. You mentioned the emotional symptoms, but really the cognitive symptoms, the forgetfulness, right? The difficulty focusing, the difficulty maintaining attention, particularly as we're faced with all of this Zoom calls. So people are really in the midst of being depleted in the face of ongoing and unrelenting stress. And I think that's what we're talking about.
You're so absolutely right. Stephen, you have any questions, anything else that you want to add?
Hi, Deborah.
Hi, Stephen.
No, I mean, I think what Deborah just said is just in a nutshell. It's just very concise of what this is all about. I mean, it's just just also hearing the cognitive piece to it is just all attached, and it makes you really think about this. It just really makes you think about where, left untreated, where this can go.
And
Deborah, go ahead, Deborah. I'm sorry.
And I would say, Stephen, left untreated, it can result in significant depression, significant anxiety. And at that point, it becomes needing for clinical help. So as we were talking about, what do you do? How do you recognize this as it's coming on to put the brakes on it? Because one of the things that we know that puts a brake on depression, won't cure it, but puts a brake on it, is engaging in activities of daily living. And often when people feel emotionally burnt out, they withdraw. I call it the pull to the bed. They don't want to talk to people. They don't want to socialize with people. They don't want to do the laundry. They don't want to do the cooking, which, by the way, I heard all of that. And I shouldn't be in the kitchen either.
and Deborah, tell our listeners that what is your background?
Oh, okay. So I am a clinical social worker. I'm a licensed independent clinical social worker. And I'm also a coach, just like Alex. And I've been in the field for almost 27, almost 30 years now. And I've seen time and time again that people miss the opportunities to put the brakes on this because they're so overwhelmed. And also, by the way, emotional burnout can occur not just when you're overwhelmed with complex tasks, but also when you are engaged in mind-numbingly repetitive tasks that offer no sense of meaning and purpose. Okay, so it isn't just the high-flying executives who are making all of these really important decisions. It's everybody, all the workers in the middle, all the workers on the front lines, all of the people who are doing and putting things together, factory workers. This is really hitting them hard.
Yeah. And we've seen it, firsthand. I mean, a lot of the
Absolutely,
training
we
that
have.
we've been doing, is direct, care. People who are not your CEOs, people who are not the executives of the business, yet what they do is critical to
Absolutely.
the mission and the vision of the business. So listen, we need to take a break. Let's do that, Mark. Let's take a break. When we come back, I want to go into, now that we know how to spot emotional burnout, what can we do about it? We'll be right back. And hello, everyone, and welcome back to Get a Grip with Coach Elex. I am your host, Coach Elex. With me, my wonderful co-host,
Steve in the medium.
and we also have on the line my friend and colleague, licensed clinical social worker, Deborah Harowitz. Deborah, thank you again for being with us and joining and having called and joined the conversation. And we are talking about emotional burnout. We talked about signs to be in the lookout for that tell you you are experiencing emotional burnout. So the question is, what do you do now? What are some of the things that you could do to deal with emotional burnout? Now, I'm going to give you my, some of the things that I would personally do. I'm certified in conversational intelligence. So when I, of course, I immediately go to how our brain is responding to those conversations that are are sort of triggered by emotional burnout. Deborah talked about we say things like we're spent, I'm depleted, I'm exhausted. There may be other things like I'm failing at my job, I'm not good enough, I'm not doing enough. And those conversations are, remember, the person that you're having the most conversations with is yourself. And I would invite all of you listening to consider that when you're having those conversations, it is your primitive brain that is in command, and that primitive brain is almost always there to activate that sense of fight, flee, protect, defend, because it's saying to you, hey, listen, if you keep doing this, it's not going to end well for you. So maybe you shouldn't be doing this. And it's the kind of brain that, again, was designed in the primitive times. We're no longer in the primitive times. Its job is to protect you, but sometimes it sort of keeps us stuck, if you will. So one thing that I would say is really pay attention to the conversations that you're having. And, one thing that comes to mind, and Deborah, I know you're also very familiar with with conversational intelligence, is learning to down-regulate, do less of those conversations that are depleting you, and that are sort of, that they're designed, they're conversations that are the types of conversations that trigger that fear, that uncertainty, and trigger you to keep feeding that emotional burnout. So, for example, things like I'm failing, those are those are conversations that are judgmental about yourself. When I'm not good enough, those are conversations that are limiting about yourself. When you withhold, when you don't explain how you feel, that means that you're withholding. You're having conversations with yourself designed to withhold. When you say that you're depleted, that you're spent, that you're exhausted, those are conversations that are critical of who you are, and all of them are designed to deplete you from from your ability to sort of deactivate that fight, fleet that really keeps fueling that emotional burnout. So, Deborah, what do you think?
I absolutely agree that those negative self-talk conversations that you have perpetuate what you're experiencing. So if you were experiencing a little stress, having negative conversations about that increases the amount of stress that you'll be feeling. So a couple of ways to deal with that. One is to separate those worries from you. And one of the best ways is to either have what I refer to as a God box or a worry jar. And so this is where you essentially write down what your worries are, what you're concerned about on a piece of paper, and you put it in a box or jar, and you close the lid and you put it away. And you're sending a message to yourself that says, my worries are safe and sound in this box if I need to pick them up again, but I don't need to ruminate on them over and over and over again because I know they're somewhere safe. This provides a little bit of mental space and a break for you to breathe. And that's really important because sometimes we get so tied up in this feedback loop that we can't interrupt it, or we have trouble interrupting it. Another thing to do is to start, and we talked about it on the show the last time, some sort of gratitude process. When everything looks horrible, is horrible, feels horrible, well, what isn't horrible, right? And this helps shift the balance in perspective. If you can come up and name 3 things that you're grateful for, well, then it's not all bad, right? Because that doesn't hold. And that creates enough cognitive dissonance sometimes between what you're experiencing and what is going on for you to also get a little bit room to breathe.
Wow. That's wonderful. That's wonderful, Deborah. Stephen, anything that you want to add? Anything that you would invite our listeners to do to deal with the emotional burnout?
Yeah, well, I mean, I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the show that getting out in nature and exercising, I think if for a lot of people, maybe not all, that are experiencing this, because they don't want to socialize, it's a great way because you can be by yourself. And it's something immediate that you can get out. And there's a lot of people that are, I think, experiencing this that, they can't focus. So there's nothing to focus on except to put one foot in front of the other and just, breathe and smell and see. And I think that goes hand in hand with meditating, which is a great thing. I know people, even normal people, healthy people that are not dealing with this, I shouldn't say normal, but people that aren't dealing with this, they hear meditating and like, no way, I can't sit there. I can't sit there for 30 minutes humming, like I'm floating and levitating. But even meditating for 4 minutes before you go to sleep and breathing in and breathing out is something that is very helpful, as well as the last thing is staying present. Once you stay present, no matter what you're dealing with, it's going to help. You can't be in the future. You can't be in the past. You can't figure out, I got to do this. I didn't do that. You stay in the present. You're right there. It helps.
And doing all of that actually is a way to change the conversation, to change that internal dialogue, to go from, having conversations about that are excluding yourself, doing conversations that are more including. So rather than say, I'm failing, be like Deborah said, find ways to find gratitude around the circumstances. Even if the circumstances are not ideal, still find ways to appreciate, find ways to discover, to develop, to celebrate, who you are, what you do, even in the face of whatever circumstances. I will say, Stephen, one of the things that, and again, you're like my guide, you help me a lot and you tell me all the time, Elex, you got to breathe. You got to breathe because I often forget to breathe. Yeah. I really do. Right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of us do.
Deborah?
We often, very frequently, particularly under stress, our breathing gets shallower and shallower. And your breath is your body's on-off switch. You can't be anxious and calm at the same time. Yeah. So controlling your breath controls your anxiety. Yeah. And I would also say that doing activities that have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and a definitive end, where you feel a sense of accomplishment, is really important in combating emotional burnout. With all the uncertainty, sometimes we just need a little certainty. And a little certainty that we do have control and mastery, that we can experience it, however big or small, also shifts that perspective.
That's fabulous. Fabulous, fabulous. Deborah, thank you so much for joining this conversation. I know that it took us a little while to get you, but I'm grateful that you hung in there and that you're here. And thank you for everything that you do. And so I really appreciate you being here, Deborah. And Stephen, I think it's time for you and I to conclude this absolutely wonderful show.
I was going to say, like we say to the dogs, let's go bye-bye.
Let's go bye-bye. Stephen, what's your biggest takeaway from today's conversation?
Well, I mean, again, I love the fact that this conversation with, having Deborah in here too is the fact that anybody listening to this live or, recorded, really that is experiencing this now, has, or in the future, will feel like they're not alone. That this is something that so many people go through, and that, that's part of this, this horrible thing when people go through this stress, is that they just automatically beat themselves up and think it's because of me, I'm not this, I'm not that, and they feel isolated, and it's just them. Nobody else is going through this. So this is what I love about this conversation.
Yeah, and listen, for me, what I'm walking away with is we have to learn to embrace all of our parts, right? Even the parts that are not perfect, that are not ideal, that are dealing with that emotional burnout, and learn to celebrate. Again, celebrate even in the face of these difficult circumstances. That's what I'm walking away with. So you're gonna hold me to be accountable for celebrating when I come to you not breathing.
You know it.
You know it. Stephen, where can people find you?
Stephen the Medium, everywhere.
Stephen the Medium, and including if they're interested in making an appointment with you.
Yep, you just go right to my website, stephenthemedium.com, and you can book an appointment. Just go to my calendar.
Beautiful. And you can find me at Coach Elix. Coach Elix everywhere. And remember, next week we are heading to Puerto Rico. We are not going to have a show, either Stephen's show on Wednesday, Through the Static, my show Fridays, Get a Grip. And Mark, our producer, he also has the jukebox with Mark. What is it?
Yeah, Mox Jukebox, but he's on VACATION.
That's he's taking advantage that we're out so that he's also taking vacation. So listen, I hope this show has been of value to all of you who may be experiencing both physical and emotional burnout. And as always, I appreciate you taking your valuable time to listen to my show. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again in a couple of weeks. Bye.
Bye.